X-Men from the year 2000.
Hmm.
IMDb plot summary: in a world where mutants, evolved superpowered humans, exist and are discriminated against, two groups form an inevitable clash: the Supremacist Brotherhood and the Pacifist X-Men. This is directed by Bryan Singer, starring Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman, Ian McKellen, Famke Jensen, and Halle Berry. I mean, this was obvious, and like you were even saying, you couldn't remember which one you had necessarily saw first. I saw this movie opening weekend. Like I said at the outset, I was read some X-Men comics, seen the cartoon show, played the arcade game, but I was much more of a DC fan, so X-Men didn't like mean a lot to me when I first saw this movie. Though I was going with a bunch of people from an internship that I had, and they were all X-Men obsessives. So this was like the biggest thing for the summer for them, waiting until X-Men came out. And I was familiar with the Wolverine character, obviously thought he was cool. No one can not think Logan is cool. But Hugh Jackman does steal this movie from a lot of other just incredible actors. I mean, Patrick Stewart, Ian
Hmm.
McKellen, who are perfectly cast. Like, there is
Yeah,
Professor
they're
X,
great.
Patrick Stewart, like, people have been talking about that in Wizard magazine for like 10 years, and they finally did it, and he's amazing. But the standout of this movie is Wolverine. Yes, as a character, but I do think it's what Hugh Jackman brings to this role, which is the pathos and the emotion to what Logan is dealing with. And you feel like he is a fully fleshed out character, not just some insane, crazy, guys who goes into berserker rage. He's got these claws, or someone who's too cool for school, which he does play that role too, which I'll get into in a second. But there's just these smaller scenes that he has, especially with the rogue character played by Anna Paquin, that really just make you feel, wow, like he is embodying a person here, and it's not just a character. Especially the scene, and I remember this at the time when he first picks up Rogue and they're traveling in the car, and
Hmm.
this is after he has the initial fight where he shows his claws, and which is awesome. Everyone cheering at that. But Rogue asks him, oh, like, does it hurt when the claws come out? And he just says, every time.
Every
And just
single
that
time. Yeah.
that delivery is just, I'm like, oh, I remember in the theater, like, whoa, like, and everyone just sort of went silent. It's like bringing this level of depth to the Logan character, which Hugh Jackman pulled off too. Yes, it's the writing, which is, I definitely want to give credit to that, but just it's Hugh. And I think the reason why he's so beloved as Wolverine, and the reason why he's been in this character for 24 years, and like I said earlier, I don't hope they never recast, and as long as he was with us, is because he brings this pathos to the
Yeah.
character. And this is when I first realized that and fell in love with Hugh and Wolverine and the X-Men. It all, for me, all those things started with this movie. So I'll talk more about the film as a whole, but just curious on your thoughts and first impressions when you saw this and what you thought of Hugh in the film.
Yeah, pretty much the same. And we've sort of said this before, so I think we'll just keep it short. But you feel in these movies, typically the stakes are really low and they start to kind of muddle, and especially as these movies kind of became bigger and bigger, even more so, like the classic kind of CGI war and what are
Mm-hmm.
the stakes? Who gets hurt? What at all? And I think in that scene that you mentioned, which is pretty early, like you see he delivers it, but he carries that pain inside of him, it's all on him, without even saying it actually. And that sort of makes it real. And that's what I'm always looking for, because I don't have that sort of 12-year-old boy comic book connection that you just here to see your idols that you were growing up with on the big screen. I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's about, okay, who are these characters? What do they bring? What are their struggles? What makes them tick or not tick? And you get all of that from him. And as we've been talking about this, because his background is theatrical, I almost feel like Hugh maybe took on this character as, some sort of like a tragic figure from Shakespeare or Greek mythology or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like that's his into this. And that's why maybe he cares and loves it so much and has been with it. And you see that in the portrayal. I think it's the right packaging as well, because again, theatrical sort of actors can be over the top, and Hugh is over the top. But I think it works because this person and this character, like it carries its rage on him and inside of him. And you get to kind of see that plucked in different directions as the franchise, goes in its culmination in Logan, which most likely we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean that sort of was a standout when I first watched it for sure. But also the world building, I had not seen anything like this before, and I obviously had not read the comic books, and I found all of that really interesting of like how all these people are coming together, what their powers are. They're all rejected from society, and what are the motivations of people, on all sides. So all that was very interesting. I had not seen this movie in a while. I'm very curious to hear how you felt about the movie watching it this time. I found the movie quite slow and quite a drag. Of course, the first, I would say, three-fourth of or one-fourth of it is pretty exciting when you meet Wolverine and Rogue, and kind of the lead up to the university and all of that is kind of fun. But then after that, it starts to drag quite a bit, as James Marsden and Jean Grey, and I didn't like Halle Berry in this role even when I
She's
first watched it.
yeah,
I
she's not a good
remember it
actress.
so
I'll say it.
clearly
She's not
because
a good
they gave her
actress.
nothing to do, and it's such a
Yeah.
boring character in general, at least the way it's portrayed in these movies. But at the pacing of the movie felt really slow, which I've said this on the podcast often. I love when characters are allowed to breathe and you're not just jump cuts all the way, but it has to be for a reason. This just feels like dead air in a movie like this, and it feels pretty jarring because when Hugh is on screen, it's like at a different level, and then things just start to kind of fall. So that was my experience rewatching the movie. But this is still a fond memory, I think, just because it was the one of the first ones. And like I said, that's why I stayed with this franchise.
Yeah, I think that this movie is quaint in a way. And I think a lot of the
Yeah.
things you were just mentioning with the dead space, the sort of not the big spectacle was because this was $70 million in 2000. This was not a big budget movie. No one believed that this would turn into a 24-year franchise. Yes, Blade had existed and that movie was a hit in 98, but this is pre-Spider-Man. This was the
Mhm.
movie that started the entire comic book movie genre that we're in right now. Redefine the genre more so than Burton's Batman or Donner's Superman. And I think you can tell that it is slower because they don't have the money. That they can't really create much of a spectacle. And I think Bryan Singer, to his credit, even though I mean he's one of the few people that
Right.
deserves to be canceled. The guy is a horrible person.
Yeah.
However, the take on what this movie is trying to do, which is like, let's not make this movie for the fans. The fans will show up. We have to make the regular audiences care about
Yeah.
the X-Men. Who are they? What are the stakes? What's the politics of this world? What is each character's motivation? They spent all that time making you care about these characters, not just because, oh, I get to see Wolverine with his mask on, which they don't do. Oh, I get to see Wolverine in comic book accurate outfits, which they don't do that either. They're not
Right.
giving the comic book fans what they want other than a big budget X-Men movie. Like, hey, you're getting an X-Men movie, so we don't need to tick all these other boxes. We're actually going to focus on a wider audience and telling a really compelling story with compelling characters and not just trying to throw in a bunch of little winks and nods to the fans because we know they're going to be there, which at the time we were not as fans frustrated by that. It was just the fact that, again, I wasn't a huge X-Men fan, but all the people that I were with, they were like, oh my God, I got to see the X-Men on a big screen, treated seriously. This is amazing. They weren't
Hmm.
complaining about, oh, why the people in leather outfits, black leather instead of the yellow outfits?
Hmm.
Why is Wolverine not in a mask? Why? I mean, these things kind of come up, but you immediately just brush them aside because the movie is good, and we never had anything like this at the time. It
Right.
was really groundbreaking. Though I definitely will admit for sure, yeah, like the movie is not the best X-Men movie. X2 is much better and
Yeah.
it gets bigger and more interesting, but I think the fact that they were trying to do something so different makes it feel a little bit more like this movie off to the side that maybe Fox wasn't really thinking was going to be this big of a hit, so they got to try to experiment and do something different. I mean, the movie opens with in a Holocaust scene. Like,
Right. I
whoever would have
was
thought.
when I first rewatched it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have no memory of this. What is happening? Yeah.
Yeah, like a comic book movie starting like at a concentration camp. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like that. But that at the time was like also very groundbreaking and
Yeah.
revolutionary. So, is this a perfect movie? No. It still works for me because I just love this franchise and where it goes. But I think all the problems and the weaknesses you pointed out are definitely there. And I think we even felt it at the time, but that was all we
Right.
had. This was way before the
Right.
MCU, way before the Spider-Man movies. It was like, wow, they're doing this. Wolverine is on screen. You get to see the claws, and you care about him because of what
Yeah.
he was doing. I think that's the genius of this movie. And then the second thing I think, and Jackman does this well too, but I again credit Singer, is they use the Wolverine character as like not an yes, an audience surrogate, but also someone who like points out how silly everything is. Like the Han
Mm-hmm.
Solo, right? Han Solo in
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars, like, oh, the Force is silly. Like, why do we care about the Force? And it's a way to deflate a self-seriousness. And in this movie, he, makes fun of the uniforms. He makes fun of like, oh, what is your name? Wheels? Like, he's like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I think that's actually a line in the movie. He says that,
Yeah.
which sort of calls out the silliness of everything. And that helps the movie not be too serious and helps the audience who aren't the geek fans into
Right.
the movie because they can kind of think, yeah, it is kind of silly. Oh, but the movie's telling me that. So, okay, this is not like I can still love it. So I think that is brilliant. And I think Hugh uniquely can pull that off.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you also see, I don't know if they were trying for this, but like, yes, all of these people have gifts and they shouldn't be othered and all of that, but they are also dangerous
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. And I think Hugh embodies that. I think it's pretty important because otherwise the argument would not be an interesting argument of what should happen, at a global stage, at a political stage. Because you see in Rogue and him, like these are not black and white heroes. There, a
Right.
lot of these people are kind of in the gray, and I think you see that it's still is good and enjoyable, just not the best one, but it is
Agreed.
great. Yeah.
Agreed. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.